Welcome to Ask Cadence, everybody. My name is Pete Wright, and I'm sitting across the table here from John Patton. Hi, John.
Hello, Pete.
So we're wrapping up an ongoing discussion we've been having here on the importance of understanding behavioral models on project teams, and broader than that, we've been talking about taking on the various individual behavioral model instruments, Myers-Briggs, DISC. We've talked about group dynamics and group formation, and now we're diving into culture.
Yes, Pete.
Where do you even begin? It seems like there are two angles we could take on this, right? First, we've got the global cultures that globally distributed teams are dealing with right now. We have business cultures that every company that has their own cultural models and ways of doing business. How do you tackle this from a project management context?
Well, I think you did a good job, Pete, in that you separated international cultures from cultures within organizations. Now let's realize that inside organizations there are cultures like technical cultures. The people who are engineers or IT specialists have some predictable behaviors as technologists. The people who are in sales and marketing have some predictable behaviors, cultural behaviors, because of being in contact with the customer and thinking of the customer.
Legal,
same kind of thing, detail orientation there. And if you look at this as a culture inside an organization, cultural anthropology techniques, yes, can be used, and they would be used on departments of a company. How does this company function? What is the overall company culture? But really what I'd like to focus on today is more the international cultures, Pete. Something I find fascinating and every company finds fascinating as they get into globalization. And the fact that more and more companies, no matter what the size of the company, is going to be working with people from other cultures. You don't even have to travel. Because of immigration in the United States, you can have all sorts of different cultures working on your project team.
So from the last several episodes, we've been talking about this really strategically. How does a project manager, understand the various norms that are taking place on the teams? It seems like we're taking a very big bite out of an even larger apple here. How do you give the project manager guidance when you're involved in a consulting situation about how to begin?
Well, first of all, they've got to become a student. Be a student with an inquiring mind. Be curious. When something is happening that is frustrating you, don't rush to judgment immediately. Perceive it. Oh, this is happening. Handle something neutrally. Short term, then go back and think about it and try and figure it out. And some of the profiles I'll give you today, comparison scales for cultures, may be able to help you if you think it has a cultural sort of origin.
All right, well then let's dive right into some of those tools.
Okay.
What's the first one?
And I'm going to focus on just two authors. Both happen to be from the Netherlands, and I don't know why. They tend to be so outstanding. But the first one is Geert Hofstede, and the second one is Fons Trompenaars. Really, I like them both, and for the purposes of time here, Pete, and giving our listeners enough of a framework, I'm going to focus on Geert Hofstede because he's got a 5-dimension scale, whereas Fons Trompenaars has an 8-dimensional scale. So let's start right through it. The first scale for comparing cultures is whether they have a low or a high view of power distance. What this means is if they have a low sense of power distance, it means that they expect to be consulted on the view that the direction that the project is going to take. If they have a high power distance sort of view, then they expect to be told. So they expect instructions and knowledge to be coming down from above them. as opposed to drawing out the direction from them based on their expertise and involvement. The second point scale is individualism versus collectivism. In an individualistic sort of view, it's okay for the personalities to come forward. Whereas in the collectivism, one sees themselves not as an individual, but more the member of a family or team that has some sort of long-term indication. You know, it's going to last for a while here. Then there's something called masculinity, femininity. It's also, to avoid gender, many people refer to that as quantity of life versus quality of life. So the quantity of life sort of level is focused on power, status, and the accumulation of goods, whereas the quality of life focuses on in the society of, are you really attuned to the feelings of other people and how they feel with what you are doing. The fourth indicator is low or high uncertainty avoidance. Now, if a person has low uncertainty avoidance, then for their decisions, they're going to look for guidelines of how to handle uncertainty. Whereas high uncertainty avoidance is going to look for specific rules, point by point, specific rules under certain conditions. And then finally, the fifth point on the scale is long-term versus short-term orientation. The long-term oriented kinds of cultures tend to think of the future and how things are going to fit into the total pattern of the future, whereas the short-term are going to look at the past and present as guidelines for how things really should fit together and should flow.
It seems like a well thought out scale. However, here we are just listening to bullet points. I wonder if you could give me an example of how how in your experience this has played out in real project life.
Sure, happy to do that. Let's take the Netherlands, for example. These are people who are pretty high up there on the individualism sort of scale. So it's very appropriate for me to call on somebody during a seminar and say, what do you think about what I've just said, John? Because they always do have a feeling. They always have an opinion, and they feel it's their right to express that opinion. So if I want a discussion to take place in a seminar that I'm teaching or in a team that I'm forming, I can call on people and ask them. I can read their body language and see that they're ready to speak up. And if they want to speak up, I've got to let them, or I can say, oh, in 5 minutes, and then remember to pull them back in. Whereas in Japan, which has more of a collectivist sort of view, if I ask at any point in a seminar, do you have any questions? Typically, a team will not ask, or I've got to give them time to think through their question. And so what I've learned to do is more at key points in the seminar, just put people in groups of 4 and say, discuss what I've just talked about, and each team has the responsibility of coming up with a question. Now they belong to a collective group and they feel more comfortable with coming up with a question.
And by contrast, if you do the same thing in the Netherlands, you have a group of 4 with 4 questions that come up.
Yes, I have to, just in the sense of timing, because of this individual need, I usually allocate a little more time for breakout workshops in the Netherlands than I do in Japan. Now, I've got to make sure in Japan that I've given them enough time to do all the work of the workshop, because it's going to end on time. Whereas in the Netherlands, I have to give them checkpoints during the workshop to remind them how much time they've used up, or make sure that they pick a monitor that pays attention to time, a timekeeper.
It seems like when to use a phrase that I hope isn't too tired yet from this series, where the rubber meets the sky, is when you have these cross-cultural teams, as we alluded to early on. Bringing it back to the specific formation of the project management team, what guidance can you give a project manager on getting through some of those, the team building or the team formation skills, or the team formation stages, I should say, that we discussed last week when working with a cross-cultural team?
Okay. If I've got a mix of people who speak up and people prefer to be quiet and wait for direction, then I'll plan some small group work where they intermix with each other and rotate people through that small group work. That's an option, but remember, I've got to watch out for those people who want to be part of a group, and they want that group to be more permanent. So we can invite into planning in a very large project the people who have a representative on the project team from different departments, invite them all in and have them work on their aspect of the project plan, their particular deliverable or set of deliverables in terms of getting it defined. They're giving their representative on the project core team status. That person will feel more comfortable in representing them as we start meeting with just the core team.
Finding a way to honor those specific needs.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an interesting mix in Latin America. It's individual expression and respect for authority. So in Latin America, people are very outgoing. That's often a perception, highly social, want to interact, and so you have to be tolerant of people spontaneously asking questions throughout, beginning to end of the seminar. They gel very quickly. Now, they'll also, if you decided to shut them down, they'd respect that and not respond at all. So you have to reach this because they have strong respect for authority.
Surely.
So you have to reach this happy medium of just the right amount so that you can make it through the seminar.
And just get through day one. That's all we're trying to do is get through day one.
That's right. That's right.
That's fascinating.
So Trompenaars has an 8-point scale. I really am not going to go into it in the broadcast. But it's very good. What I'd like to talk about in Trompenaars is his research on called "Did the Pedestrian Die?" Now, in this one, I'll just keep it short. He was able to begin evaluating cultures by giving them a case of assume that you, Pete, are riding in a car as a passenger, and your best friend is the driver. As the driver approaches an intersection, the light turns red. He guns the car and he runs right through that intersection. And on the other side, he hits a pedestrian. Now,
this is a horrible example already.
Well, it's what it does is it makes people serious, and so the story goes that your friend is arrested. Now, you are the only witness to this accident, and you get a call from your friend a week later, and he says, when I go to court, I want you to say that the light was green, because I could go to jail here. And the question is, what are you going to do? Now, Trompenaars found that in Nordic cultures, that the answer was, I'm going to tell the truth. And the answer was, well, what kind of a friend is a person who would ask me to lie under solemn oath? Now, in more southern European cultures along the Mediterranean, the answer was, well, of course I'm going to say the light was green, because what kind of a friend am I if I don't support my best friend in his time of need? And then there's the more particular one, which I'll name the country. It came from France. And logically dissecting both the question and the answer, the person from France said, well, before I answer, I have one question. Did the pedestrian die? It makes a difference, you know. And so here were different cultures with different takes on a pretty serious sort of situation.
That's
here.
Fascinating.
And it just rings true throughout the cultures that they You can, if you're taking a foreign trip, I would recommend two things: going to cultural tables that both of these gentlemen have, on where you can find out what your compatibilities are, where you are likely to have feel some frustration or some discomfort. And then I also highly recommend the book, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. It's been regionally structured that gives you some high-level sorts of advice on how to behave.
You have links to both Hofstede entrepreneurs that we can post in this, I assume, yes?
Just a web search,
Okay.
On cultural comparison scales would be the best way to find their books and to go into, or the names of each one of them, and review their books. And the main thing I would like to close on here, Pete, is in your culture, just as much outside your culture, patience and courtesy always goes a very long way.
Excellent closing words, John. Thank you so much for your time in talking through this entire series of the importance of behavioral models. On behalf of John Patton and Scott Lissett, who we didn't have with us today, my name is Pete Wright. Thank you for downloading, and we will be with you next week on Ask Cadence.